As we're recording, it is Wednesday morning, and it wasn't too long ago that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy concluded his remarks to the Congress, speaking from Ukraine, from Kiev. And what did you make of his remarks? He made a pretty impassioned plea yet again for more U.S. support. He invoked a bunch of meaningful dates and people in American history, things like 9/11, Pearl Harbor, Martin Luther King, and made a pretty strong emotional appeal. How did you take it, sir?
I thought the address was very strong. I thought it was powerful. I think President Zelenskyy and I think the Ukrainian people are heroically defending their nation, and it's inspiring to watch. I will tell you, as we sit here today, watching the carnage, watching what's unfolding, which is truly horrific, it is maddening because this was entirely preventable. This war didn't have to happen, and it is the direct consequence of two specific political mistakes made by Joe Biden. Number one, last summer, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan and the surrender to the Taliban, the incompetence leaving Americans behind. Every enemy of America, from Russia to China to Iran to North Korea to Venezuela, they looked to Washington. They took the measure of the man in the Oval Office. And they concluded tragically that he is weak and feckless and ineffective. And at the time, I said the chances of Russia invading Ukraine have increased tenfold, and the chances of China invading Taiwan have just increased tenfold. That was one of the precipitating causes of this disaster. The second precipitating cause is very specific to Russia and Ukraine, which is that Putin didn't wake up yesterday and decide that he wanted to invade Ukraine. He's wanted to invade Ukraine for decades. He desires to reassemble the Soviet Union. He did, in fact, invade Ukraine in 2014. He invaded Crimea, the southern portion of Ukraine, but he didn't invade the entirety of the country. And the reason he didn't, the reason he stopped, is that Russia's major source of revenue is selling oil and gas. And that natural gas goes in pipelines right through the middle of Ukraine. And if he invaded Ukraine, he risks damaging or destroying those pipelines. The next year, 2015, Putin began building a pipeline called Nord Stream 2. And Nord Stream 2 is a pipeline under the Baltic Sea. It runs from Russia to Germany, and it skips Ukraine altogether. And the reason Putin wanted to build Nord Stream 2 is so that he could invade Ukraine and not need their pipelines because he could get his gas to market. In 2019, I authored sanctions legislation in the Senate to stop Nord Stream 2, and it got overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate, overwhelming bipartisan support in the House. President Trump signed that legislation, and Putin stopped building Nord Stream 2 literally the day that President Trump signed my sanctions legislation into law. For over a year, the pipeline was dead. It was a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean until Joe Biden became president. He was sworn in on January 20th. 4 days later, Putin resumed deep sea construction of Nord Stream 2. Several months later, Biden formally waived the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, essentially giving Russia and Putin an enormous multi-billion-dollar gift, green-lighting Nord Stream 2. Putin completed the pipeline, and that is why Russia invaded Ukraine. At the time Biden waived those sanctions, Ukraine publicly said, if you do this, Russia will invade Ukraine. At the time, Poland publicly said, if you do this, Russia will invade Ukraine. You know, just 2 weeks ago, Zelenskyy did a video conference call with all the members of Congress. He told us 2 weeks ago, if the United States had sanctioned Nord Stream 2 last year, Putin would not have invaded Ukraine. And so it's Biden's mistakes that caused this horrific war in Europe.